Now, please note that when I say absurdity, I am referring to the circumstances and situation within which the character of Piper Halliwell was written and placed, which severely influenced the direction her character took. This is a critique of her character, yes, but from the perspective of asking why certain choices were made for her in a way that doesn't make any sense and was quite frankly unbelievable to me. Because here's the thing, I love Piper Halliwell. I've always adored her. What I do not like, however, is the direction her character was taken in. So, this video would be a mix of a love letter to Piper and a what the hell were they thinking to the writers of Charmed. So, with that said, settle in and let's chat about the absurdity of the character or characterization of Piper Halliwell. Now, I have been thinking over the last couple of days that based off of my last Charmed video, which centered on why Phoebe is so hated within the fandom, a lot of people might be operating under the misassumption that I don't like her character. That is false. Phoebe, up until the end of season 3 and early episodes of season 4, was tied in second place for my favorite Charmed sister with Piper. I adored her at the start and the role she was meant to play within the Charmed ones. And I was wondering if you all would like to see me make a video on Phoebe, examining her strengths and strong points, and where her character could have been taken in the show if the writers hadn't completely wasted her potential. If the answer to that is yes, Noria, make a second Phoebe video that is almost a love letter to her potential. Please let me know in the comments so I can get to work thinking on it. Don't worry though, it wouldn't affect my Paige video as she is next in line. So, Paige fans or haters, depending on what part of the divide you fall, I have got you. But away from her other sisters whose name also start with a P, I'm back to the woman of the hour and the reason why I'm making this video. Piper Halliwell. Because here's the thing about Piper, a lot of the writing decisions for her character seem to contradict who Piper is or was. I do believe that the Charmed writers in the latter seasons, because of their drive for needless drama and a desire to keep upping the scale of things, always seem to forget who these characters were at the core. And the show suffered heavily as a result. And this is very much obvious with the characterization of Piper Halliwell. So we'll start at the logical point for me to begin this video. And that is Piper's relationship with Leo, which I honestly do think that Piper and Leo's relationship and the way it seemed to crumble and warp and could not hold on to the weight and burden that their lives were placing on the marriage was actually symbolic of Piper's characterization in the latter seasons of the show. Every time I restart my rewatch of Charmed season 1 with the mess it was and the shoddy CGI and what is clearly the show trying to find its footing is one that I always think of very fondly. Because, as with all first seasons of television shows, it is instrumental in introducing us to the characters we will come to love as the show progresses, gives us a clear idea of their character arc and where they would hopefully be by the end of the show. And it also brought us the love of Piper's life, Leo Wyatt. Or at least he was at the start. By the time we hit the latter seasons, I found myself asking where the initial Leo, the one that Piper adored and vice versa, where did he go? Where did the Piper who loved him wholeheartedly and completely vanish to? How did the writers take us from the butterflies of Piper's heart being caught between Leo and Dan before she finally chose Leo and they had to navigate their relationship underneath the weight of the elders' disapproval bearing down on them to the way their relationship became at the latter end of the series? Where Piper is so short tempered and abrupt with him, constantly lashing out at a Leo who has been stripped of his wings and had become this quieter shell of a man. It all felt so weird. Like the writers had decided that Piper was going to get all these girl boss moments with her sharp, acerbic wit, wielded constantly against her husband and anyone else who might stand in her way. And I am not going to lie. At the start of the transformation, I was all up for it. I understood that Piper had been dealing and was processing the grief she felt at the loss of Prue and what that meant with regards to the change in their family dynamics, i.e., Piper is now the eldest and has to deal with that responsibility. See, I was okay with that, with her showing of how Piper gradually adapts to the weight of set expectations and the responsibility it brings, and how that slowly changes her now that her big sister is gone and she's now the eldest. If that was the story that we got, a case of Piper constantly battling that and us, the audience, getting moments of reflection with Piper when she's alone and she considers how she has to lose every part of who she formerly was. Because that Piper, the one who is a bit quieter and shy, who didn't leave her home like the rest of her sisters and stayed close to Grams instead, caring for her as she took on a role in a bank that she did not want. If we're able to see that Piper is clearly torn between her belief that that Piper isn't strong enough to lead and protect her sisters, that Piper isn't Prue strong, only for her to have that final realization much later in the show when she's alone or when she's with someone else, like say Leo or her sisters, who basically talk to her and point out that she can be a more assertive version of herself. She can be all of these things, but she should still remain as Piper, who they love and adore and is the best of all of them. Because Piper really is the best of them, to be honest. Like Graham says to her, she is the heart of their family. And yet, with the way in which the writers turned her into this person who was just needlessly mean to Leo, to Paige, when she was first brought into the family, although, to be fair, and in Piper's defense, Prue had just died and she wasn't in any mental space or able to process the addition of a new sister. Piper, who was sick and tired of being one of the charmed ones and just wanted out of it all, disregarding what them quitting might mean for the rest of the world. That Piper doesn't seem to be the glue that holds a family together, that helps them remember what truly matters and how they need to retain their kindness to handle the responsibility placed on them as the heart of the Halliwell family should do, ideally. It's like the writers either forgot that summation of her character that they had Graham say, and so she totally strayed for that, or they have a very different perception of what it means for a character to be seen as the heart of a family and what qualities said heart should have. Because I could believe that statement had claim about early seasons Piper, but the latter one? Sometimes, yeah, and a lot of the times, not really, and that hurt. Because I flashed back to the very first episode of Charmed. She and her sisters were all dealing with this new influx of powers that they now have, thanks to Phoebe reading from the Book of Shadows. Everyone else has their own concerns, but the one thing that worries Piper through it all is her fear that she might now be evil because she's a witch. It's played for laughs when she's terrified of stepping into a church for fear of thunder striking at her. Yeah, but it is a very valid fear that she has. Until Phoebe points out to her that her fears about being a bad person now that she's a witch is false because Piper is someone who cares deeply and a lot. To have that be retconned in the latter seasons, with Piper just casually disregarding the lives of the innocent, doesn't make any sense to me. It is absolutely ridiculous that she resists binding Wyatt's powers even after she's informed of how his uncontrolled abilities have led to the death of innocents due to him conjuring a dragon and letting it loose on an entire city as a baby. I mean, yes, I understand her worries and fears. They are pretty valid. The fact that Grams basically sealed their powers away and erased their memory of magic meant that her and her sisters were really unprepared when they first came into their powers, and she didn't want to subject her son to a life like that. I absolutely get it. Nevertheless, her hesitation showed in that moment that Piper considered Wyatt feeling connected to his magic and being able to wield it even as a child as more important than the lives of innocents. And it just makes me think of season 1 Piper, who was scared of entering a church because she was terrified of being a bad person now that she was a witch. As I watched the episode, I kept wondering if that Piper would be able to recognize future Piper. Because I could not, and it just It's so different from the way our character had been set up at the start of the season that it is absurd to me. Characters are meant to grow and evolve through their arcs in a story, and in Piper and Phoebe's case, the show has them regressing in a way that had me entertaining a somewhat ridiculous notion. If the writers perchance had forgotten that the charmed ones were meant to be heroes and thought that they were writing a villain story, because it's only characters who are categorized as villains that we see their regression and slow descent into villainy as their story moves forward, i.e., Anakin Skywalker or Walter White. Now, I'm not going to pretend that the source of Piper's conflict had not been established earlier on in the show. Even back in season 1, Piper had always been the sister who craved normalcy. She wanted a happy, regular family and thought that them being witches would hinder that. But at the same time, a lot of those thoughts were initially expressed at the point before she got with Leo, and they were officially recognized and their union blessed and accepted by the elders. The minute she chose a white lighter as her husband, a normalcy could never really be attained. And I guess for me, it is the more logical choice to have your character come around to that realization when so much of her life and desires for family are tied to magic, that normal might not be in the cards, at least in the way in which she envisions it, but they can make do and try and create it for themselves anyway. That is the logical thing to do. What the writers chose to do instead was turn this into a constant refrain for Piper, to the point that she started resenting the innocent, which, refer back to my initial points, is contrary to the heart and core of who a character is, and it just left me a confused, bewildered mess at that illogical writing choice. If your characters are stuck in the same exact thinking pattern for 8 bloody seasons, your audience gets tired of constantly being told that Piper Halliwell just wants a normal life, because, girl, you haven't gotten it in 7 seasons. Why would the 8th be any different? It felt like it was just pushed for drama and to give Piper something to focus on and obsess about, but it was so out of character for her in my book, because it made it seem like she was stuck in this mental stasis and couldn't move away from her default programming, that it just had me screaming and wishing I could toss my phone at my TV. Because, as is the fate, I guess, for long-running series like Charmed, writers often run out of steam and ideas and start tossing everything but the kitchen sink at the board, trying to generate plot points for future episodes. And when that happens, more often than not, in said brainstorming session, people forget the core of the characters they are writing for, as at that point it's less about staying true to them and more about creating storylines that can be explored to keep the show running and the character interesting enough for the screen. I hate that word, by the way. Interesting. Especially when it pertains to an established character, because that often means that someone is about to start some experimentations on said character, which often than not would lead to results that I find very unpleasant, and in the case of Piper Halliwell, very absurd. But that's just me, of course. Would love to hear your thoughts as well. Please drop them in the comments. Like the video if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet. Consider sharing this if you want and supporting me on Patreon if you can. Either way, you will be supporting my channel and I am grateful for that. Until tomorrow's video, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism. I am human and I